Hey guys, thank you for joining us again for another exciting episode of Yoml. This is the Year of Magical Learning podcast. Today we're doing Reflection 256, and it's one of our top 10 book. And we're closing this reflection. This is part 5 of the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. So let's see what Chris has in mind for his reflection.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Obviously, this is one of my and yours, I assume at this point in time too. Top favorite books ever read. Definitely not an easy read. But I swear to
But
you, it's
interesting.
but very interesting. Yeah, I think later on down the road, one of the things that I personally have learned, I guess, in this journey is um people take a lot of other people's work and then they just say like, there's so many books that I've read where it's like I hear the same psychological experiments that somebody else did that's pieced together to form their own narrative and their own version of something else that they're trying to
Right.
and
Mhm.
it's very rare you actually read the source code of where a lot of these things came from,
Yeah,
and
you want the origin, right? The
right,
origin, like you're talking about Darwin's origin. You're talking
right,
about the 7 habits of highly effective people. They're talking about thinking fast, slow. This is what I mean by when I read an author's book, I'm reading his life work, which is like you're
right,
talking about somebody is spending their time in the trenches, studying everything, and then compiling to and orchestrating
right,
to this meaningful book for us. Not somebody who is a professional writer goes out there, okay, oh, I read this book and I'm gonna have a story and I'll summarize it or whatever, and I take a piece out of it and
right.
then bam, right? It's not your work; it's somebody else's work. You just distill it, right? It's synthesizing it. So, in essence, like because somebody is taking one point out of let's say the book about the 7 habits of highly effective people. Somebody can go in there and take
First things first or
one
something,
thing, yeah, first
right,
and first,
yeah,
and
right,
write a book about it, right?
right, yeah,
But
yeah.
you want to go back and say, well, what is the
Yeah,
origin
where did
of
that come
that? The
from? Yep,
origin comes from this guy who's through his career built this habit and teaching this
right,
to his clients and kind of foundation for his career. You taking his lifetime work and you build upon it. So when you read that kind of book, you are essentially absorbing 50 years worth of knowledge from a person.
yeah, yeah. You're
Not
right.
only not only that you're absorbing the knowledge, you're absorbing an orchestrated, prepared knowledge. Not just like, oh,
Yep,
here's a water fountain. No, he distill it. Well, in a book, right? Like throughout of all your experiences, right? There's certain things that make sense and certain things make sense, and then you take it and you kind of lay them out in an order where it makes sense to the user, to the reader, and so you not only get the experience, the data, the validation, but also like the the like the summation of what all this means, in
it's
the
it's a
end.
it's that's a great point. I know this isn't about the reflection at all, but like you actually see this in like the top 10 favorite books in this journey. Think It Fast and Slow is a very original book. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that everything that Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky did in there was 100% their own thoughts. I mean, but the work was original, right? Like it was very much so like them interpreting it and like you said, doing everything you just talked about. Then you got like the Black Swan or like any Nassim Taleb book. I mean, this is this guy's soul in the game, like he is all in on randomness. I mean, like that's his life's passion and work and exploration. And yes, he cites a lot of other source codes in there, but it's all combined together into a unique
I
uh,
mean, it's a
uh
study. It's still a
expression.
study of study. It's not
Right.
just a distillation of an existing concept and idea, right? So he basically does his career, which is, what is it?
He was a
Behavior
trader.
economics, right?
Right.
He does
Oh,
behavior economics, right?
yeah, yeah.
Right. So that's his life work, and so he studies the underlining, but then actually take it and say, well, I studied these things, I found these things, right?
Mhm.
So they actually found something
Right.
and they reporting it.
Exactly.
Versus somebody say, hey, I'm gonna take exactly
I'm gonna
the
look at what
same
somebody else found.
concept, right? In the seven habits of highly effective people, and take one other thing that I just took it from the book, and I just take it and say, maybe the art of not giving a fuck, for example. It's
Right.
maybe you take it from some existing study. I mean, you basically kind of learned it, but
Right.
you didn't study it and distill something different. You just
Yep.
take it and you kind of like paint it a little
Just
bit.
regurgitated it in a different format,
Regurgitation, yes.
right. Where I was going with what I was saying is like, yeah, the Black Swan, super original, synthesis, whatever you're saying, like super original, like, in terms of taking other information, processing and turning it into something unique that's their own. Thinking Fast and Slow, same thing. The Happiness Hypothesis, same thing. Seven Habits, same thing. Think Like a Monk is one of those kind of ones that I wrote a 5-part reflection on that we're gonna come up with. Very much so unique because it was that guy's lived experience and turning it into how he applied that to a different world and a different universe. And one of the only ones that I feel like isn't maybe the most unique is Humankind. That's on there. Sapiens, like that's a great example as well. That was another top 5 favorite, right? Maybe the only one I can think of like one of my top favorites that I did like a 5-part reflection on over the course of this journey was like Humankind, where that book was kind of a regurgitation a little
Right.
bit of a lot of
So
different
the thing
things,
is, for
but it
the
was really
most,
unique regurgitation. It wasn't like
so
everybody
yeah.
else's.
So for the most part, like to me, usually an author will have only one book, 1 to 2 books,
If
right?
it's about their
Uh,
life, if it's unique, yeah.
Maybe 3 books in terms of Taleb's, because Taleb he broke it down, but he couldn't write it in one book. But
He really only wrote 2 good ones, like
that's what I'm saying. That's
yeah.
what I'm saying is the if the book is
He just
about
kept
his life
writing.
work,
Right.
then that book is basically the good book. But if he
Right.
continued to write on top of it, it's he's adding anything more to
Yeah,
what he would.
Skin of the Game had nothing really new to add, in my opinion.
Right,
To
skin in the game is it's
anything,
just
right? Yeah.
his rant about how people don't have skin in the game.
Pretty
Well,
much,
but
yeah. I mean,
right, it's so it's so a lot of time, just like the origin. My thing is, you think about the origin of the species, right? That's Darwin's lifetime work, and basically it's in one book. And
yeah,
any book he writes isn't going to be as good because he spent his entire life collecting these species and categorizing these species. What else can he write that say, hey, oh, it is so good, just as good as the origin of the species? Think about it.
no, you're right, and I mean, we've talked about this many a times. Specifically, you remember the Kevin Smith book, the movie director Kevin Smith, like in Clerks was his famous, debut movie that was
right.
uniquely Kevin Smith. The movie actually sucked. Like it was poorly filmed, didn't have a big budget. Like the actors were no ones. And really the plot was just stupid. But at the same time, like he did it, and it was such a unique movie that only he could tell about his own lived experiences in life. But then after that happened, everybody was like, I want more of that Kevin Smith. And then it became like, well, that's a Kevin Smith kind of movie, and then it was just him trying to recreate, in different ways, kind of like Skin in the Game, in my opinion, of like Taleb is like, hey, look, we love the Black Swan, Anti-Fragile. Now it's like now he just keeps writing about the same kind of genre, the world, whatever. Now it's becoming like a job, Now you're like, well, all right, I think I said everything I wanted to say about that. Like, I need to go back to living for another 20 years before I could, come up with a new, theory that I've been practicing and as a practitioner in the field with my soul in the game to then come back to you with something that's completely unique, and like you just don't see that, with like you said, there's not really usually a second act, for some of these transformational books because there was only one act that you could do. That was their life. Like, I mean, it was like
I mean, there's only one life. There's only
right.
one life. But anything else, anyone dies. They don't. For one, they don't have the skin in the game, and second, they don't have time in the game. So without the time element, that thing ain't gonna be anything of substantial influence. It just isn't. I mean, so So
You're right.
unless you
Yeah.
have two lifetimes, you can have two books.
Well, no, you can have more than one book. It's just you have to have a lot of lived experiences in between books.
Well,
Like
yes and no,
it's a
because you think about it,
um,
this, the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People is a long book. It's like how many hours?
yeah,
Like 11 hours, 13 hours, something like that.
right,
Because they could actually split it up into two parts, right?
right,
Or split it up to 7 parts, one habit each thing. But to me, as far as a book is concerned, one book is concerned, is the whole seven habits. That's a whole, like, because you say, hey, there are seven habits. I need only learn. I only need to learn one, right? That's not complete. So same thing with Taleb, right? He does his inserto, right? Because he decided to break it up. But essentially, for me, as far as my perspective on Taleb's, like, I'm looking at all his books, all his parts, right? That is the life work. That's one book to me. That's one person to me. When I read a book, I'm saying, hey, I am peeking into this life of this person, this author,
right. Yeah,
right? And so the lab happens to divide it into two books, right?
right. Yeah, no, you're right.
He could have write one book.
but you can tell when somebody's writing for content and they're right or they're writing for with their soul in the game.
It's a right to educate, a right for content. That's two different, I guess, um goal. I mean, if
it
you
is.
write for content, then usually you write for the writing sake, and you like Malcolm Gladwell, right? So like I said, he has a lot of books, but probably only a few of the books make any
Yeah,
sense. And the rest of them was like, okay, he just basically, decided he need to pick up some new topic and put his
yeah.
spin on it, right? And
It
say,
was
well, this is what I think about this, right? Whether or not
yeah,
this is I have enough time to study it, to let it marinate into my head, and then maybe come up with something,
right.
brilliant. But I said, well, this is my initial thought when as a spectator or as a viewer. He's
I
not in the
mean,
trenches and say, hey,
he
I'm
does
doing this, I'm
research.
doing that, right? No,
He
he
researches a lot,
research
but
is
he's not in the
different.
trenches.
He research is one thing, right? Research is good, but it's only half the battle because you have to
Right.
be actually in the trenches. Because you're talking about, like, if Malcolm Gladwell gets to the point where he actually go and talk to the people who has this desirable disadvantage, and he going to say,
He
well,
he does
initially
he does in some
I,
of
I
them.
I think it's good, but now that I see and interview people and actually have a disadvantage of my own, I don't think so. Because if he doesn't have a disadvantage, his opinion really isn't that deep.
I agree with everything you were saying. So like Gladwell is weird because I'm actually officially finishing his last book right. I just started it today. I was like I might as well just keep it going. This is the last one of every Malcolm Gladwell books, and I was like let's just do this, right? And now that I can take a look at his own, you know, and library of collection of his writings, there are certain books that are very personal to him,
Mm-hmm.
like Talking to Strangers, which was about racial profiling basically, and how we can't
If you're
seem
not in the trenches, the
right.
insight on that, deep in terms of the um, I guess the delivery and of the elements, because
Right.
you're not there. So even if you can say, well, I can see, but I can only see the tip of the iceberg. I can't see what's underneath it. But only if you become entrenched in it, then you say, well, there's more to it. And
Right.
this is why the insight is so, profound when somebody is spending their whole life work in this trench, and also put the soul into the game, meaning that they actually experience it. And so in those cases, those books, these other rights are good books. So this is why I always look for people. I mean,
They're
like I
always
said, I'm
interesting.
I'm not saying that there are some books that Malcolm Gladwell writes is very, very fantastic. There's some book it's just not to my level of expectations.
Well, yeah, and going back to the Kevin Smith analogy, there are Kevin Smith diehard fans. Like, one of my best friends, his name's Kevin, ironically. He is he loves Kevin Smith movies like Chasing Amy and Dogma and Clerks 2 and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back and whatever. The list goes on and on and on, right? Like, I mean, there are diehard Kevin Smith, like, like people. Like, I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
like a cult, and any new Kevin Smith movie that came out, they were like, gotta go see the new Kevin Smith movie. And it was all because, you know, Clerks like hooked them all right at the beginning, and they were all like, man, this guy's got something. Well, Malcolm Gladwell, has something, like, in like Tipping Point hooked a lot of people into his, way that he constructs stories, right? And then from there it's like, well, you kind of always know what you're going to get when you start a Malcolm Gladwell book. It's going to be a fun adventure. It's going to be a lot of aha moments you probably haven't heard. It's going to be really well constructed, very well constructed argument, very, some insights that you didn't see. So a lot of kind of, like, I mean, he's like, what you're gonna get. But now, like, if we're talking about it holistically, like you and I are talking about it now, like, he only has skin. He doesn't have soul in the game in any of his books. He has skin in the game in a few of them, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's a few of them that he has like nothing in the game. Like David and Goliath, like that's the one that we were like arguing about with this whole, desirable disadvantages thing. Not arguing, but that's the one that you and I were discussing recently. And it's like, what the hell is that about? And like, that one I could say hands down is like the one that he has the least amount of anything in the game. He has nothing in the game in David and Goliath, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
At least the Tipping Point in a lot of ways is kind of about what he was even trying to do with his own book. I mean, like, that book hit the tipping point. Like, it was a he was constructing his own argument of how to make, something into a social contagion, right? And then, keep moving forward. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We have to go through like the anthology of Malcolm Gladwell books. But my point is I think you're spot on. Like, he has no soul in the game in any. I don't think there's any crown jewel of Malcolm Gladwell's work that's going to transformationally change anybody's life if they read it, because
Yeah,
I
because
don't know that he
you
has
think about
anything.
it, if he does, and with his ability to tell a story, the book that he writes will be,
Unreal.
exactly.
Unreal. Like, I mean,
Daniel Kahneman has like the I guess the profound insight. It's just that, in his book, he's not the best
yeah,
writer, okay?
yeah.
But
I mean, I agree with you. Uh, I mean, this is a funny conversation because this has nothing to do with the reflection, but like, it makes me think of like Adam Grant. Like, I think Adam Grant is one of the best thinkers that I've ever, and most intriguing, curious thinkers that I've ever listened to ever. Like, whether it be his podcast or whether it be interviews with him, whether it be, even some of his books they're pretty okay, but his books are pretty underwhelming, honestly. Um, uh, and I feel like it's because he doesn't ever really have his whole soul in the game in any of these
mm,
books. Now Simon Sinek is like, they're like arch rivals, between the two. Or at least Simon Sinek calls Adam Grant his arch rival. And
how come?
because he thinks that Adam's smarter than him, and I don't know.
So,
It's like an arms race on social media between those two, and
uh,
it's about a money making venture for Simon, I think. And he wants to be the best. He wants to be. I don't know. I mean, he like
I mean,
he
I think Simon Sinek has one of those things too. He should have only one book. Whatever he does, there's only one book that say
was
this is Simon Sinek. Anything else that
right.
he writes ain't gonna be just ain't gonna be good. Just
I
because
I
what
I
else is there for him
say
to say, right?
I don't know,
He can say, hey, I'm going to compete with Adam Grant and I'm going to write more books. I mean, Adam Grant has how many books? Like,
like four, I think. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
Simon, even though he can write more books, there's only one book in my
yeah.
mind that can you say, hey, this is Simon. The rest is like, hey, this is Simon trying to be.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Is I actually think Simon Sinek is a way better writer than Adam Grant, and I think he tells a better story. But the problem is, I think Simon Sinek is always just trying to tell a story. And I do think he has more soul in the game though, than Adam Grant does. Honestly, Adam Grant's more academia. Anyway, we're way down a rabbit hole. But I think it's an interesting concept that we were just talking about. But either way, like, soul in the game books resonate, and like, study the source code, because like, when you find somebody with the soul in the game, it usually becomes source code for a lot of other people's, skin in the game, or just talking about stuff, like,
Right, and to me, it's that's where you want to spend your time learning. You want to learn
the
from the
originals.
origin, right? The
Yeah,
origin, because the origin is essentially where it came from. And a lot of times, like I would say the majority of the books out there is a regurgitation of an existing idea,
So
because
many of them.
it's many of the goal was for content, and
Right.
wasn't to educate, wasn't to say, hey, this is my life story and my legacy. I want to pass it on. I want to let people know this is why I did this, right? Because you're talking about Kahneman, right? He has his career.
Yeah, he doesn't give a
His
shit. Yeah.
his career is behavioral economics.
Yeah,
He
he was a
isn't.
Nobel Prize winner at that point in
Yeah,
time, you know? Yeah.
yeah. He isn't here to say, "Hey, I want to be an author." An author is not my profession.
No.
You know what I mean? There are authors who are there is that their profession, because they are writers. They write, but when you are good at writing, you don't know what to write. You know how to
Right.
write. You don't know what to write. And the
Right.
people who are good at what to write don't know how to write.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, if you spend most of your time doing behavioral experimentations to study, how people behave, how people using psychology, blah blah, right? You're not you're not practicing your writing skills. You're practicing
Right.
your psychologist skills, right? So
Yeah.
that's just logical. You
Yeah.
you can't really say, well, this guy is really good at how to tell a story. Sometimes they have both, but it's very very rare. I mean, you're
So
talking
rare. Yeah.
about I
Like
mean,
Taleb
talking
is
about
really rare. You know, yeah. He's a great storyteller as well as soul in the game, you know, with his own.
right.
That's why I think he's so compelling, at least to me. I mean, I know he's compelling to you, but like I love his storytelling, like his because he's telling stories of his real life, you know, of
You're talking about
reading
Fat
these things.
Tony.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like he tells it. Well, actually, you know what? Let's jump in because this is about telling a better story, right? So the last part 5 of 5 with thinking fast and slow is about telling a better story. So as we all know, as we've learned in this journey at this point in time, you know, humans love stories. Like that's how we think. We learned in, you know, moonwalking with Einstein, right? Like when you want to be the world, you know, memory champ, you know, Olympians and Olympiads, like they don't use rote memory. They don't use numbers. They don't use, you know, anything. They use visuals, imagination, and stories to remember, because that's how we learn and that's how we remember things. That's how things stick or they don't stick. You know, like the book Made to Stick that we'll talk about in the future. Like that stories are sticky. Like that is what we remember. Like, you know, that is how we process things. So Daniel Kahneman, one of the things that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and I wrote about this in my own book of I Can't Imagine, which was the two selves, the experiencing self versus the remembering self.
Mhm.
And what the difference between the two is Kahneman describes it is, to sum it up, I guess the experiencing self is what's going on right here, right now, right? Like you and I were talking, it's cold in this room, you know. I mean, I have a cough or something like that because like I inhaled a bunch of cottonwood as I was cutting the grass. You know, it's like my hands are a little sweaty for some weird reason right now. Like, you know, like these are the things that I'm experiencing right now, right? You know,
Right.
I don't really think about it, but like really for the most part of the time, we don't really actually think about like what we're experiencing in the moment, right?
Mhm.
Versus, you know, in retrospect, when we go back and I think about this, like in 6 months from now or something like that, I'll think about, oh, that was a really fun story that we were talking about, you know, soul in the game writers versus not soul in the game writers. And like, you know, we had a great dialogue going on. I was hanging out with a really, really, really good friend of mine that we're exploring life together. And, you know, like that's what I'll remember. Right. So that's the difference between the experiencing self versus the remembering self. I won't remember anything that I just described to you of. It's kind of chilly in the room. It's, you know, it's my hands are sweaty, like, you know, whatever. You know what I mean? Like I won't remember any of that shit. Like there's no way, right? So that's what Daniel Kahneman describes as the two selves, and it made me think about you know, the power of storytelling to yourself, right? So and I go back to what I always go back to, which is you know, Amelia, right? Um,
Mhm.
what my family experienced, if I was just going to take the experiencing self version of what we went through with Amelia, my wife, and I, you know, it was brutal. Like every single day was monotonous. We were trapped in a room in a hospital with COVID raging around us. We were and we spent all day long listening to bings and bongs and nurses coming in and going and doctors coming and going out of the room, and being worried and anxious at the same time, trying to figure out how to keep ourselves sane going forward, trying to figure out how to take care of our daughter as best we can and how we can contribute. And every single moment in that NICU was half the time was boredom. You're just reading a book or whatever. And then there's tiny little moments every once in a while where we get to go take some photos with Amelia, or go record her doing something new, or kangaroo with her, or hold her hand or something like that. But it was those moments were few and far between in the whole totality of the 39 days that she lived in this world. If you took it from the experiencing self, it was miserable, for everybody, right? And then she passed away. If that's all we were thinking about from the experiencing self, that's what happened. She was born, we were miserable, things were hard, and then she passed away. That's not what I remember. That is not how. Obviously, you've read my book. That couldn't be further from my remembering self versus experiencing self. When I think about that right now today, when I think about our time in the NICU, I think of we wrote it all down here, but the most precious being I've ever been around. I think of somebody that had more courage and strength and ability to endure, that I watched that happen every single minute of the day. I think of feeling calm around her, with just being in her presence and hearing the breathing machines going on around, knowing that she's alive and next to me. I felt I was having fun sometimes, meeting new nurses and talking about and learning about their lives, and talking to the doctors and asking a lot of questions about the care that Amelia was receiving and what she was going through, and being curious myself and learning more and more about this life that we were immersed in of the NICU world. And I remember sitting in the chair next to her and reading all these different books and learning myself. I remember just being in awe of her ability to do what she was able to do. And then what I remember most was the last 7 hours of her life after we extubated her, and I saw what true courage and strength and ability to endure really looked like, as my wife and her had one last crazy long kangaroo session where they just wouldn't let each other go. And that's what I remember, right? I didn't walk away from that experience going, I told myself this story, right? And I whether I did it on purpose or whether I didn't, I don't know. I don't know that I made that active decision ever, but this was a story that I chose to embrace after Amelia's passing, and the story that led me to writing the book and exploring that that whole entire concept, and letting people know her life wasn't awful, her life wasn't tragic, her life was beautiful, and her life was filled with purpose and meaning, and it helped me to find my own purpose and meaning at the end of the day. And that's the story that I chose to share with the world about Amelia and about our life and my family's life. And that's the story that I live to today. And that's the story that I'll probably live for the rest of my life. And that story could have been a bad story. I mean, I could have easily had that atomic bomb, hit, and woken up and told myself a story of woe is me and woe is my family. And, this is miserable life without her. And it is it did. There was definitely moments where that, felt like that. But I, for whatever reason, when the good wolf and the bad wolf, were talking to me, I chose that one. I don't know why. I don't really, I couldn't tell you why, but I did. And this is where we're at today, right? So this was a kind of a pivotal lesson for me to learn, I think, along this journey, and it came from this book of telling a better story, remembering self versus your experiencing self. You can kind of choose what narratives you place around life, and then let that be your guiding purpose. And we have that power. That's kind of a really cool thing about humanity. So anyway, we'll pause there. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think people are wired to experience. They're not wired to remember, because even if you remember something, you have to re-experience it in order for you to recall the information. So it's very, because the thing is that the way you write your book is you are essentially taking the readers into the NICU and you say, well, this is what happens, right? You so an example I can give you is that if I told you that, I woke up today and I had a lot of fun, right? What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that
Or
what does that mean?
well, they would say, hey, yeah, fun, but the thing is, you won't remember what I said to you. But I told you that I woke up today, right? And then I heard this noise. I went outside and I saw this bird, right? This bird is, is you know, playing with the water bowl and blah blah blah, and and my kids, were so excited to come out, and they were trying to catch the bird, and everybody was laughing, right? I'm just telling you what happened, but
Right.
I didn't tell you it was fun. But you heard me say, the kids were excited, the kids were running around, the kids were laughing, right? These things essentially telling a story, you taking the reader through essentially what happened, and that is includes you, because if
Right.
you tell a story just like that, you say, well, that when you remember. And if I were to retell the story, well, if I say, well, I had fun, even I don't remember what I said to you, because has no meaning to us. Okay, we cannot remember anything we can't experience, because whatever you tell me, hey, it was tragic, it was brutal, has no meaning to me,
Right.
has no meaning to me. If you tell me about the kangaroo that your wife had, you tell me about the story that Amelia, after she was extirpated, that she continued to held on for much longer than anyone ever could. That's inspire you. It's not to say, hey, she was inspiring.
Right.
So if you told me that she was inspiring, it doesn't mean anything to me. So we can only experience. We cannot remember. When you think you remember, you're gonna have to take some part of the re-experiencing to retell the story. Because
Yeah.
if I can't do that, right, there's nothing for me to say. So if you tell me how my day, right, if I can't recall the experience, I can't tell my day. I can't tell you my day.
Right.
So we are wired for that, and so in order for any one of us to remember, so for our own sake, right? To say, well, what kind of story are you telling yourself? It's you got to tell yourself a story if you want to remember the good time. Hey, this happened, that happened. This is the result. Versus, okay, it was fun, we had a blast. That means nothing
Right.
in
You
our
you
head, right? Because you
you have
can't
to craft it.
imagine,
Craft the narrative.
fun, right?
Right.
You can't
Yeah.
imagine fun, and because fun could be many things. And so when you have things that's ambiguous, how can you say, well, I have this image in my head of this fun? What does that mean? Well, it keeps changing. When it keeps changing, it's eluding you. You cannot store anywhere. And
Right.
so I think having the ability to tell you a narrative, say this, you imagine, even if you imagine it, and you want to tell yourself an imaginary story, as long as you pinpoint the details of what you did, what you imagine you did, you will remember, and then you can tell it on to the next person. And so that's two part. The first part is you can remember because you can re-experiencing it, right? And second part is if you want to be, I guess, um, what's the word? Like um, persuasive in a way where you get
Mhm.
people's attention and focus. You have to give
Get
them.
your own attention. I mean, you got to get your own attention too. I mean, like you can control your attention of what
Yeah,
of what
you
you
want
give your
you
attention to. I
you
mean,
want to hook people's attention. If you
and
want
yourself.
to, you want to withdraw. You want to draw the people's attention, right? You're gonna have to give them something they can experience.
Mhm.
Because if you don't, because if I tell you about my day, right? I say, well, it's funny thing, this morning I woke up and I walk outside and I step on poop, right?
Right.
So, and then I chase after my dog, blah, blah, blah. So I'm telling you a story. I mean, I'm not saying, hey, I had a bad day. I had I mean, you can decide that for yourself. But even if you decide that, whatever you decide, you forget. But
Right.
whatever I just told you, you will remember because that is the source code. We go back to the origin of the book. That's the source code. The source code can be distilled into, hey, True had a blast, or True had a bad day, or True had a whatever. But the distillations always can change over time, because you say, well, I hate True today because, or whatever, and then later on you forget that you hate me.
Right.
But what I did, if you remember what I did, you can always use that to reframe your feelings about what I did, right?
Right.
And so that to me is the thing we're wired to be drawn to. So we're drawn to these details. So you can tell me the most banal story about your day. I had, today I woke up and Luca was doing this, and then he was chewing on that, and what. Even that to me, it would draw my attention. It hooks me into, okay, what's next? What's next? Because
Right.
we are wired to want to discover what's the next
It
thing, what's
is.
the next thing. But if
And
you tell me, hey, Luca was sick, or he was happy, or he was very energetic, that means nothing to me, and I can't put an image. And even if I could, I'm imagining this image that it wasn't correct, and because my mind wasn't sure, the elephant wasn't sure, it's not gonna store it. Say, hey, yo,
it's the
it has
context.
question mark, right? A
Right.
question mark. I'm gonna hold it into my short-term memory. If I decided later on as what's important, I can store it.
Right.
But it won't.
It's the context is what I think you're referring to, is like
The origin, the
look at
source code.
right. Yeah, but like setting the stage, like I can see a picture of Luca in a classroom. It's about, the size of like of a normal kid's first grade classroom or whatever. There's 10 kids running around. And
Mhm.
in this corner over here, you got little like rider up or down things, and they got like 3 or 4 tables in the room, and there's like 2 teachers that are
Well,
in
I
this room
don't think you
all the
don't
time.
need that context, though. I think context is good to kind of enlighten the story, to make it clear, but it's the act of somebody doing something that what draws me. Because you can say, well, Luca, he took up this toy, and he started to chew on it, and then all the blue ink start to spurt around. You didn't
Right.
describe any of the background environment, but I am so like hooked into that. What the hell happened to, what did he chew on, why
Right.
is the blue ink, and what is the toy, right? So that to me is the hook, right? It hooks my attention, it draws my attention to your story. If you say, describe to it, hey, he's in this upstairs room, my attic, where there's brighter background, there's a globe background, blah blah, right? It's hope, but it wasn't what draws me. I think what
Oh
draws me
yeah.
is what people do. It's more of
Right.
like the action you do versus what you can distill away from. Okay, you know, Luca got into trouble today,
Right.
right? So it isn't as compelling as, hey, he chew on this ink, and this blue ink just spurts everywhere, and it hits the carpet, it hits the computer, right? So the thing is, the act of somebody doing something versus distilling it for people and say, hey, because you can't experience trouble, you can't experience fun.
Right.
It's what you label it, but you cannot experience it. So this is what my point is: you can only experience, you cannot remember. Remembering is we is re-experiencing. If you,
Remembering is real.
because
I no, I actually don't think that's. I think remembering is the emotions.
but you can't remember if you cannot re-experience in your head.
Well, no. It's not the emotions of like I don't have any emotions right now, right?
You
Like
don't
I have
have
none.
to have the emotion when you remember. You still have to experience. Hey, what did I did, right? You go through the motion. Because the thing is, when you tell me, like, how do I remember Amelia's story? It's because you took me into the room, and I was, because when I read your book, right, I felt emotions because I'm experiencing
This
it.
this
And
this is what this is what I'm
I
getting at.
can experience it the first time, when I can recall it, because I go through the same image. But if you
You're
tell me
you're
Amelia
going through
has
the
a,
same emotions is what you're going through. Like
but
I
the point the point the point
the
I'm trying to make
experiencing
is that I had to experience it,
the
right?
emotions.
There don't have to be emotion. It could be like an image. But
Right.
usually emotion will goes with the image,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because when you look at an image, like let's say you look at a pretty face or a pretty flower or a puppy, right? You have an emotion. When you look at something that is, something you don't like, maybe you like, you hate spiders, or you hate, uh, bugs or whatever, you will react to emotion. You look at somebody eating a lemon, you have an emotion to
Right.
it. You feel it, right? And you experiencing it. And I'm telling you, hey, I'm going to take this yellow lemon, I'm going to cut it in half, and I'm going to squeeze the juice, and I'm going to suck on it.
Right.
What do you experience now?
Um, I probably would experience tartness or something like that,
Exactly.
but
That's my
but but
point. My point is
but
you have to re-experience it
it's
or imagine you experience it to recall, because
hmm.
when you're telling somebody why you're experiencing it, this is what I call remembering.
Yeah, but like I don't know that I agree with that. I think
Because
like
if you tell me about like I told you about, like I said, because I'm saying, like, if I say, well, this morning, uh, I decided that I want to get onto this diet, and I cut this lemon wedge, and I, just stuck on it, right? You're
well
experiencing it.
no I'm not. If you told me, then I got like super, tart taste in my mouth. I started spitting everywhere. I was like, started drinking tons of different water. Like, then I'm feeling the emotion with you of like a panic that's like, oh my God, this is disgusting. My
And
eyes
my
started
point, my
watering.
point
Like,
is, the more you have the experiencing, the more you can recall the next time and the time after that and the time after that. But if you shorten that kind of experience, then eventually it's gonna fade.
I agreed. So I guess what I was, where my brain's going with this, and as we're talking through this, is like the remembering self to me is there's a whole spectrum of emotions that you can choose when you think back on an event. Like today, this past week, Luca has been sick with that hand, foot, and mouth crap or whatever the hell it is, and he's got these blisters all over his mouth right now. He's got his hands look like leopards, like little leopard hands, and he's spots all over his body, and his like little butthole is like just covered in these little. It's gross. Like it's just gross. And it's finally getting a little bit better, but like
This is what you're
I
doing. You are telling a story. You're not saying, hey, he has foot and mouth disease, and he is, whatever. You are telling me how it is, and that's what I experienced, and that's how I remember. Because otherwise, I won't remember. I say,
right. Well,
was it foot and mouth disease, or was it something else? Was it some itch, something like? I mean, but because I wasn't sure what kind of it. I imagined some kind of a rash, some kind of red dots on his body because I made it myself. But if
right.
you told me he has these things, blah blah blah, right? That is not something that my brain is deciding. You say, well, he told me what it is, so I'm just gonna take it and I'm gonna store it.
For sure. Well, so like I agree with that. The way that I'm describing it to you is a way that I can interpret the story, and I'm smiling. It's fine, whatever. Like, but like I easily could have looked as I look back on this past week. Like, there's been times where it's been incredibly frustrating because I'm trying to work at the same time as taking care of a sick child. My wife and I are fighting back and forth, multiple times, about who's doing what, when, where, because like we both have, day jobs that we have to do, and all these other stuff that we have to coordinate our life around, when life changes and we have a sick child and we can't go to daycare and all this other stuff. So like I could have easily narrated the story about how pissed I am about my wife, how pissed I am about this is going on. This is like the fifth fucking time that he's been fucking sick. This is I could have gone on this negative tangent rant. I could have picked that emotion out of this and said, you know what, like this is what I'm going to anchor on, and this is how I'm going to craft this narrative around, and this is how I'm going to describe this to True of what life has been like over on this side of the Zoom chat, for the past week. Or I could go, you know what, I've actually been okay this week. Like, I mean, it sucks, like, having a sick child, but at the same time, like, I kind of like having him here every once in a while. And now I've gotten pretty damn good at like, figuring out how to navigate my day, my work life, and taking care of a sick child because I've done it so much over the past, 6 months since he's been in daycare. So I actually don't mind anymore. And like when my wife gets mad about stuff, I'm just kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's not a big deal. Like, we'll figure it out. Like, she's like, I'm like, I don't actually really care anymore. So I'm saying that this is how I'm thinking about the remembering side of everything, where that's the narrative that I'm choosing to tell myself. And that's how it comes across. I feel like when I say that to somebody, because I could
Right.
easily pick from like a platter of emotions, and I'm like, that's the
Right.
emotion I'm choosing to pick.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree. I mean, what you're saying isn't isn't different from what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that the way that you have to store, right? Because you experience something, you can say you can take it, and in order for you to remember, you have to retell the story to yourself for you to
Yeah,
remember. And when you
yeah.
retell, you are trying to re-experiencing whatever you experience. The other one you don't, right? You have to re-experience for it to store. If you don't re-experience it, it won't store it. Because among the days,
Yeah.
it could be
But
something that,
but but
hey, either you
but the
don't like, but then
re-experiencing
it's
is interpretation though. That's what I'm trying to say. Is like I can re-experience it in a million different ways with when I remember.
no, I don't think you remember the interpretation because you can interpret something, but you forget it. You can only say, so whatever you did, right? Let's say you choose, let's say there's certain things I do. Hey, maybe I'm talking about the bird, right? And my kids were having fun and we were laughing and they were, trying to chase the bird and trying to catch the bird, right? And we're having fun, we're having a blast, right? That to me, the source code of what we remember is the activity that the kid did, right? Or there could be another activity where I step out and I step on a bunch of poop, and I had a bad experience. I experienced that too, but
Could be
decided
could be a good experience.
I
I guess.
decided to take the kids with the birds and retell it to myself and retell it to
Right.
you. I mean, I'm re-experiencing it. The other one I just left alone and eventually it fades, right? Because but if I say, well, on Thursday, I had a fun time with a kid. If I were to interpret that as a good time today, I would not remember because there's no way for me to recall that. I can recall it, but there's nothing for it to write to your storage, your memory, because
Right.
after that you say, well, I had a fun day Thursday. What day was it? You've completely forget. But if I can say, well, the kids is chasing the bird is this color, the bird trying to do this, the bird, it trying to peck at my daughter's hair or whatever. That is what I remember, and the interpretation can come later. Interpretation comes as you bring it up and re-experiencing. But I understand that you can choose what you want to recall because the experience is there. But if you
Right.
interpret the experience, right, and without the source code, without the origin, that will fade quickly. That's why you don't remember. That's why you. Meaning one of the art of studying isn't to say, well, I'm going to repeat this 1,000 times, because if you do that, what happens? You can pass the test because short-term memory. But after that, you completely forget it. You don't have no idea what you. I mean, you don't remember
It's
a
a good
single
point.
thing. But if you say, well, I wanna know what happens to this molecule when I add this. If I go to chemistry, I'm a chemist, right? I don't imagine the formulas. I imagine the molecules. I imagine the little thing, like little it goes and it bounce each other, right? I remember them. I mean, because to me, chemistry is easy.
Well, it's like a photograph. I mean, like
Right. That's what I'm saying. We are
it's
wired.
like
We are
you
wired to repeat and imagine things that you can imagine, because
like
that thing is concrete. Anything that you interpret is more of a ambiguous labeling, like fun. Fun
right.
could mean 1,000 things,
Right. This
right?
reflection is not much different than a photograph for me. Like I mean, it's something I can look back on and I can get.
Something
It
you can
takes me it take
experience.
it takes me back and no, yeah, no, seriously, it takes me back
Something that you
into
can
you know,
re-experience.
right, yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's my
yeah,
point, right?
right,
So
right, yeah,
eventually, to circle back, you have to re-experience it to remember it. Because if you can't experience it, then whatever you tell your story,
yeah,
it's not, it's going to be hard to remember. So my point is that when you tell yourself something to remember, and you can decide what you can tell yourself, and that's why I agree with you. You decide, hey, there are good things and bad things. I decide to retell the story of the good things, and that will continue to get anchored and continue to write into the memory, and I will remember that. Because you talking about writing a book,
yeah.
and one of the reasons why your book is so compelling to me is it moves me because you took me through the steps. You didn't tell me how it was.
Right,
You told me how it is. This is what happened. I
right,
went to this. I sit down in this chair. I read this kind of, and you told me not only I read some book. No, you read. I read this book, right? I was on this page, right? That can't be any more clarity than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good
You
point.
look at rocking
It's
chair. You're
describing a
doing the
photo, you know.
kangaroo. You're doing a kangarooing session
Right.
with your daughter and your wife doing it, right? And the feeling that comes out of it, that is what I remember. And I can see I read it once, okay,
Yeah.
and I can still remember it. I mean, that's what I'm saying is and if you want to remember the good times, tell yourself the story in that fashion.
Totally. I was pulling up this photo as you were saying that because I wanted to show you this. Okay, so this is a picture of my wife and I at a vineyard
Vineyard? Uh-huh.
in Spain, right?
Right.
So geez, I can't. There we go. This yeah. So it's a photo of my wife and I at a vineyard in Spain. And I've seen this for some reason, like Apple keeps popping this thing up into my the photo. You don't have an Apple, do you? You have an Android. Yeah. So does that show you like, you know, this day in history or whatever, like, you know,
Yeah,
or like this album? Okay, so for whatever weird reason, like a couple of like, you know, trips that we have on my phone like always pop up like on like a, you know, hey, you know, scroll through this or whatever. And for whatever reason, I probably because I click on them a lot, like these trips come back up all the time, right? And the funny thing is about this photo, like we look super happy, we're ecstatic, we're on the rooftop of I can see it in my head right now. We're on the rooftop of this vineyard. There's the mountains in the back from the Catalan, you know, the Catalonia was where we were at, like near Barcelona. And we were drinking, you know, having a great time and exploring this place. And I remember the bus trip out there, and I remember like seeing Montserrat, which is like this monastery that was up in this mountain chain that was near there, and you know the little vineyards that we were touring and stuff, and we're having a great time and yada yada yada. But the truth is I think I also remember that night was when I discovered I had bed bugs all over me because we were staying in this hotel or this Airbnb in Barcelona. And in that photo, that same photo, I had like bed bugs everywhere. And I'm pretty sure my wife and I got into a fight that night, you know, about something. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something
exactly, because you didn't tell yourself the story. You tell yourself a different story.
Well,
But
so
you were
every time
experiencing
I
it
see this
now.
photo, I'm like, oh man, that was such a great day. That when I see that photo, but then I also am like, oh my god, like I had bed bugs everywhere, bites all over me. That was like our second to last night in Barcelona, and I like the next day that I woke up, they were like swollen everywhere, and I was like, what the fuck is happening? I slept on the couch the last night, and like, you know, and somehow my wife didn't get bit, like, or she only got bit like once. I'm like, what the hell? I don't sleep with a shirt on, so like so I didn't have a shirt on, so that's why I think I got bit like all over my body, but she had like clothes on, I guess, you know. But anyway, like my point of what I was bringing up with this is like I see this photo and I go, oh, what a great day, you know. And then now, like now that we're talking about this, I'm like,
now
man, that could have easily been like an awful day. I could easily have gone like yeah, that was right before, you know, that like actually I wonder if you can see it in this photo. You can't you can't see it enough on my arms or anything like that, but there was I remember scratching on the bus ride out to this vineyard, you know, like it was underneath like my polo cuff or whatever, and I was like man, why am I like and like I was like, did I get stung by a mosquito? And by the time I got home, I had like these 4 like things, and then by the end of the night I had like all these like things all over me, and I was like, oh my god, I think we have bed bugs. And like anyway, and we did, and that guy did not refund us. Like he didn't refund us in our Airbnb. He only gave us a half off. I'm like, half off? You gave me bed bugs, like, man, like I think that deserves a full refund, right? You know. But he did not. Anyway,
but bed bugs are included.
Bed bugs included. Yeah. That's the only time I've ever had a bed. Actually, the apartment was an amazing apartment too. It was an awesome place in Barcelona, and I don't. We just got unlucky with that one because I've stayed in so many Airbnbs in Europe, like, and never had a bad experience. That was the only one. That was probably the nicest one we've ever stayed in too. And it was one that had bed bugs, ironically. Anyway, all right, I'm done. I'm done for the night. Any other things you wanted to touch on? Any final thoughts?
No.
So the question I think we can leave for everybody is, what story are you telling yourself? You know, I think it's pretty clear.
How do you tell a story where you can re-experience it? To me, that's the key.
I agree.
To remember anything.
How do you re-experience it is a question, you know, like, because Do you re-experience it just in how do you document that? Like, is it a photo? Or do you write it out? Do you, like, how do you remember? How do you document what happened so you could then go craft a narrative around that? Because I think that's probably one of the hardest things is like you were saying, like to remember even what happened, because I wouldn't have remembered what happened on that rooftop in Barcelona. Whenever I see that, it makes me happy. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like, I definitely remember having bed bugs, or something like that night. So how do you remember the good stuff? Like you have to document it somehow, right?
Yeah, you have to document them. That's why I think it's all because every single memory blob need to have a what I call an address, meaning where do I start with it? Usually it's a photo, usually it's a video, usually it's a souvenir. Those are the key to access that storage. Meaning when you look at the photo, there are many things you remember from just the photo itself.
Yep.
Same thing, you document it by you taking pictures, document by writing it, document by telling. So back in way past, right? The only way for us to document it is to pass on the story, is to tell the story every night. After the hunt, we would sit down around the campfire and would tell the story of how you took down the woolly mammoth, or how back in the day when you had to do blah blah blah, or how something was made, or how I got the skin or whatever. You that's how you create
pass
this.
on knowledge. I mean,
yeah, I mean that's how you document.
Right.
Back then, it's how you document it. So you tell a story again.
Right.
And everybody is hooked into listening to the story, and this is basically been buried and burned into our DNA. That's why psychologically we are drawn to people who can tell a good story. It could be something, hey, my day was I went to HEB, or I went to grocery store and I saw this fruit, right? It's not exciting as, oh, I jumped off of the cliff and the waterfall and blah blah blah. No, it doesn't have to be. I just say, hey, I saw this fruit. Behind a bunch of fruit. What's the point? Well, I was hungry.
That's funny.
And I wanted fruit, right? Even then, it is exciting for us to say, well, it's a good story. It was fun, right? It could be as banal as that. As boring as just, hey, it's a normal day. It's Tuesday morning. And it is still exciting. But you can say, hey, I had this epic adventure where I was wrestling a shark. But if you can't tell me how you wrestled the shark, say the shark was, was strong and it was powerful, it means nothing to me. It means nothing. I mean, maybe I went to go straight and I bumped my side into the corner of the food cart tray, and I get this pinching pain, and I was like guy like become this hunch like a side hunchback kind of guy and limping for the next 5 minutes, right? That is exciting versus, hey, I wrestle a strong whale and I won.
Right.
I think about.
No, I agree with you. By the way, do you know what HEB stands for? I just learned this the other day.
Yeah, it's Harold E. Butt.
Yeah.
That's the guy's name. He lives in San Antonio.
I know. His last name is Butt?
Yes.
So weird. That'd be the worst. That's gotta be the worst last name ever. My name's Butt,
But he has HEB now, so I don't know.
No wonder they called it HEB. I'm glad they didn't call it, hey, go to the Butt supermarket, nobody, I don't think anybody would be shopping, hey, get the freshest butt, freshest meat at Butts, Anyway, all right. Let's call it for the night. But that was a fun conversation as always, and that concludes our Thinking Fast and Slow.
But 5-5, and there's no more.
No
maybe.
More. Maybe. Yeah, maybe in the future. Actually,
it could be part 6 or 5.
Part 6 or 5. Hey, you never know. You never know. I did write 2 more for Black Swan actually recently after I read.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So
hey, the Black Swan has a part 1 or 2 and part
7
2
parts of 5. Yeah.
Okay. It's part 6 or 5, part 7 or 5, right?
Well, no, we're on an ultra marathon now. Now I'm just writing for fun. So like this is just going to be for you and I to talk about on our podcast. Like, this is no longer, Yoml is over in my mind, right? Like Yoml has ended at 365. now it's just let's just have fun. And we're running an ultra marathon now, and ultra marathons, I don't know where we're going, but
no, we're not running a marathon. We're just running.
No, yeah, right. That's what I meant. Like we're just
I'm just running.
distance.
I don't know about a marathon. There's no goal. I'm just running. I say, hey, yeah, I like the running. That's all I see. That's all I see. I don't say, hey, I'm running a marathon, because marathon has a definition to it. Hey,
it has an endpoint.
Yeah. For me, I'm just running. So, where are you running? I'm just running.
Agreed. Yes. Now we're just running. So like now I'm just writing about, I'm off on some random trail and I don't know where we're going, but like it's fine.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, it'll be fun. Yeah. I don't know where we're going, but we know how we'll get there.
I don't think it matters where we're going. As long as we're going somewhere. As long as we're going. That's what I enjoy. So to me is in like, hey, I get to that point, because if I do that, then I gotta find another place to go. Because that's how we're wired. We can't get to a place and stay there. We are made to move, and as long as I'm moving, I am satisfied. I'm fulfilled. I get to do whatever activity that moves you and give you this happy, goody feeling inside. That's what you should be doing, versus trying to do what you are told to do.
Agreed. So. Awesome. All right. Well, let's have a great night for everyone. The question we can leave for you is what story you're telling yourself, and we will see you all next week.
See you Monday. Good night.